The world had gone cold. It was a place where nobody dared to light a fire. Humans lived in constant darkness, hiding in caves or building rudimentary shelters out of stone and wood. In this world, without flames, humans had forgotten what it felt like to be warm. And worst of all, they'd forgotten the taste of cooked food. But one man named Dio remembered, because he was the last person in the world who still possessed the sacred flame. He walked around the cold wasteland with his torch high above his head, trying to find someone to pass the flame on to. But after decades of fruitless searching, Dio was exhausted. One day, he tripped and fell, dropping his precious torch into a dark crevice. As the flame flickered and died, Dio knew that his long life was also coming to an end. But before his eyes closed forever, he saw something that made him sit back up. At the bottom of the hole, he saw a small sprout growing towards the light. And when Dio looked closer, he realized that this little plant was burning brightly with the same sacred flame that he carried. Dio didn't know how or why, but clearly this little sprout was destined to be the new keeper of the flame. So with his last bit of strength, Dio pulled himself up to the plant and laid down beside it, entrusting the future of humanity to its tiny leaves. You are watching The Last Quest for Fire. The story begins in a world that's completely frozen over, except for a small patch of fertile land where a village still exists. But even though the ice has frozen the entire world, humans still live in constant fear of the great blizzard that rages beyond their village walls. No one dares to step outside because if they do, they'll be met with certain death. So everyone huddles together inside their homes, living in the dark and eating only cold rations. Dio is an old man who remembers a time before the blizzard, a time when humans could use fire to keep themselves warm and cook delicious meals. To remember those days, Dio keeps a torch that burns with a sacred flame. He walks around the village, showing the flame to the people and telling them stories about the past. Most people just look at him with hatred. They don't want to hear about happy times that they never experienced. But young Kurosawa listens to the old man's stories and dreams of a time when he can walk outside without freezing to death. One day, Dio decides to leave the village and search for other humans, so he can share the flame with them. He steps outside for the first time in decades and immediately regrets his decision. His body freezes almost instantly, and it takes all of his willpower to keep moving forward. But Dio keeps walking until he collapses from exhaustion. Luckily, he doesn't freeze to death. But no one finds him, and he spends a long night shivering alone in the snow. In the morning, Dio wakes up and sees that his torch has fallen, and the flame is slowly dying out. Even though he's desperate to keep the flame alive, he can't get it to burn brighter. This is a bad omen. If the flame dies out, it might not reignite again. So, Dio continues walking until he finds a cave to hide in. Deep inside the cave, Dio finds a small opening that leads outside. Maybe if he crawls through this tunnel, he can find a place that's safe from the blizzard. But when Dio squeezes through the rocks, he finds himself in another cave that's filled with ice. In the center of the ice cave, Dio sees a faint glow, and he walks towards it. He quickly realizes that this light is coming from a mysterious crystal that hangs from the ceiling. And when Dio touches the crystal, it releases a burst of energy that revives his dying flame. The crystal gives Dio new hope. Maybe there are more humans in this cave who also need his flame. But then he hears some strange noises. A huge monster made out of ice is shambling towards him, growling loudly and swinging its massive arms. Dio tries to run away, but the ice monster is fast and agile. It swipes its paw at Dio and knocks the torch right out of his hands. The flame falls onto the ground and slowly begins to fade away. Even though Dio has lost all hope, a small bird suddenly flies into the cave. It pecks at the ice monster's face and manages to distract it. Then Dio quickly grabs his torch and runs out of the cave. When he looks back, he sees that the bird flies straight into the glowing crystal. The crystal releases a blinding flash of light, and when everything goes black, Dio hears the sound of flapping wings. When Dio regains his sight, he sees that the bird has transformed into a beautiful woman. She introduces herself as Shen and explains that she was trapped inside the crystal until the ice. Monster Lord Dio into the cave. Now that the ice monster is dead, she's free to leave the cave and travel the world. She wants to join Dio on his quest to spread warmth and light to other humans. The two heroes continue their journey, but they soon come across a group of bandits. The leader of the group, Takasada, threatens to kill Dio and Sion unless they hand over whatever supplies they have. But Dio and Sion refuse to comply, so the bandits attack them. Although Dio and Sion work well together, they're eventually overwhelmed and tied up. Takasada throws Dio's torch into the fire and laughs as the sacred flame is slowly extinguished. Sion is furious and unleashes her ice powers to freeze the bandits. But as soon as she does, the ice begins to melt and the bandits wake up unharmed. Just as the bandits are about to attack again, Dio uses his last bit of strength to stand up. He tells the bandits to look up in the sky and they see that the sun is shining for the first time in years. Dio explains that the sun won't shine again if he dies. But if the bandits let him live, he can pass the flame on to someone else. The bandits hesitate, but Takasada tells them to attack. Dio closes his eyes and waits for his freezing to death, but it never comes. Instead, he feels a pair of hands gently touching him. When he opens his eyes, he sees that one of the bandits, Balsa, is kneeling before him. She removed her hood and revealed that she was a woman. She apologizes for attacking Dio and asks him to give her the torch. Balsa admits that she doesn't understand the importance of the flame, but she doesn't want the sun to go out either. So she takes the torch and runs away. Balsa takes the torch to the top of a mountain where she throws it into the air. She spins around to catch it, but loses her balance and stumbles off the cliff. As she falls, she sees the faint glow of the crystal cave in the distance. With the last of her strength, she dives into the cave, knocking the torch out of her hands. It lands right in front of a small plant that's growing out of the ice. The plant absorbs the torch and bursts into flames. It grows rapidly and becomes a massive tree that produces delicious fruit and spreads its branches to cover the whole cave in light. Outside the cave, Dio and Sion find Balsam's body and bury her under a tree. They do Yuante know that the seeds from the torchwood tree fell on the ground and sprouted into a small forest. As time passed, Dio and Sion grew old, but they continued to travel the world, spreading warmth and happiness to anyone they met. Eventually, they too died and were buried beneath the ground. But the torchwood tree continued to grow, providing warmth and light to every human that lived in the frozen wasteland. And that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching.